Hello, everyone! Welcome, boys and girls, women and men, and children of all ages, to a new podcast that we're starting up. A podcast about wonder and joy and beautiful and fantastic things, which are the best and not the worst, though sometimes we might discuss the worst in the context of framing the best, because sometimes the best is just a little bit better than the worst. But really what we're talking about here are the things that, in the words of Marie Kondo, spark joy in our lives, in our gaming lives, and that's why we're calling this the JoyPad. Yes, that's right. We're going to be talking about everything joyful, wonderful, and fantastic about gaming and in the ways that it has enriched our lives. My name is Tom. I've been a gamer for all of my life since I received a Game Boy at age 5. And I'm going to be introducing my other two co-hosts, Mr. Fleming and Mr. Pinto. And we're going to go around and introduce ourselves, and then we're going to get right to the different topics that we want to, well, let's be honest, just gush over today and talk about why they are such fantastic things. So first things first, why don't we start with Mr. Pinto?
Hello. I am being referred to as Mr. Pinto because two people on this podcast have the same name, and I am one of those people. I have also been a gamer for as long as I can remember, as long as I have been switched on, as they sometimes say. The first games I remember playing are on the Super Nintendo, and man, it's all been history from there. Mr. Fleming!
Thanks, man! Yes, my name is Mike Fleming, so you'll hear Fleming a lot. I have been a gamer since I can remember, probably before I could speak. Older brothers and stuff help with that. So yeah, super excited to be here, and let's get started.
So if you haven't already figured it out, there's two mics, which is why there's a Pinto and a Fleming, and then I, your fellow host Tom, am the mic check, as we have already joked a little bit. So, all right, who wants to go first?
I was just going to say, let's already start having like a bit. Let's do a bit. What's everyone playing? I'll go first. Right now, I'm currently playing through the Kingdom Hearts series because I finally want to play Kingdom Hearts 3 after 15 years?
I think there's something like that. Somewhere around 2005, maybe. It was definitely around then.
You know what? I never made it through. I made it all the way to the end of Kingdom Hearts 1. And I was just never good enough to take down the final boss, whose name I believe was Ansem. Is that right?
That is right.
If I'm wrong, someone on the internet will tell me that I'm wrong. So I can also tell you from having watched a couple videos on YouTube about the continuity of the Kingdom Hearts series that there are just people who just trade names and lives and likelihoods, and everything gets a little bit crazy. But that's neither here nor there. What I was really getting at is I played some of Kingdom Hearts 2, and it was kind of a blockbuster rental because that's how long ago Kingdom Hearts 2 was.
Yep.
But having never finished it and having never completed that far in the series, I've never saw fit to start Kingdom Hearts 3, though I want to.
I don't think I played Kingdom Hearts 2 or 3 at all. I played through 1, but that, again, was 2002 or whatever, 2003, something like that. So it's been years since I've even looked at those games.
I have to ask, being probably the most competitive gamer of us, Fleming, did you beat the final boss, and by how much did you clobber the ever-loving life out of him?
I don't remember. I honestly don't know. I know that I worked on, I believe, getting Cloud in Kingdom Hearts, the original. Wasn't he in that one? Or was he not in that one?
I mean, you could...
At certain points, yeah.
You could find him.
Use him as a summon, I believe. I just played the game, and I don't even friggin' remember.
Yeah, it's been too many... It's been too long. I can tell you in any of those, especially at a younger age, I would play until, like, I was already way over-leveled. Like, not to jump from Kingdom Hearts too much, but Final Fantasy VII, I used to love the mini game that you played at the Condor place. You know what I'm talking about? When you first basically get open world. I loved that mini game. So I was level like 40 before moving on past that point because I loved playing that mini game and I needed money. So I would just kill, spawns and get money and then go back and play the game. So in regards to Kingdom Hearts, I don't even know. I don't remember much about the story, but I bet you I clobbered the boss.
I knew it. That's why I brought it up.
I recently purchased the PS4 HD remakes, so it's 6 games in one. I recently just completed Kingdom Hearts 1, and I'm now on Chain of Memories, which originally came out for the Game Boy Advance, and it's kind of boring, I have to say, but I'm getting through it. I'm almost done with it, and then I have 4 more games to play before I can move on to Kingdom Hearts 3.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to look forward to Kingdom Hearts 1.01 Super Deluxe Mega Card Battle Edition.
And the fun part is I'm not even gonna buy Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm just gonna borrow it from a friend.
Sharing is caring.
Exactly. And of course, I'm going to speak for all of us and say that we have been playing a crap ton of Rocket League, with the occasional StarCraft 2 and Left 4 Dead and Stardew Valley sprinkled in there.
I mean, we could talk about every one of those games at length.
True.
I mean, seriously, they're all very, very good games.
I'll be honest, I think we could do a lengthy episode about Rocket League, but it might not be appropriate for this podcast because there would be so many ventings of frustration.
Well, I actually think I would say that based on how much I know you guys have played it more so than me, but like Stardew Valley could be an entire episode on its own.
I would also just like to quickly say this podcast will consistently be full of spoilers, most likely, just as an FYI. So when you hear what our topics are, if it's something you haven't played, just know that you're probably going to hear some spoilers, and you can't get mad at us because we warned you about it.
We should probably put that message at the very beginning of every episode.
Yeah, I would
totally.
say if we're going to be if we were to talk about any game that has come out recently, we would almost certainly say, like if you're listening to something like that, you have to expect to be spoiled, to some degree. We'll try to keep certain things quiet, but like if a new Final Fantasy came out, we're all playing it, we all want to talk about something, well, you should probably expect that we're going to talk about the, scenarios that occurred or whatever. And if someone's like, I didn't know that Kefka ruins the world in Final Fantasy 6 or 3.
Whoa!
Yeah, like, how would you not know that at this point?
The game's almost 30 years old, yes.
Oh, God. Wow.
But there are children in this world
that have not played
who
it.
are not yet 10.
That's true.
And we want them to listen to our podcast and not be sad children.
That's right. We're trying our best to watch our profanity. So, Mr. Fleming, what have you been playing recently?
Pretty much what you guys have talked about, and one of mine is a topic later that I thought would be fun to talk about. But one of the games that you did not mention that I play, and I actually just started playing again after about 2-year break, is Payday 2, which is a kind of first-person shooter, but based on missions with heisting money from banks or other kind of opportunities, if you will, for that gang to exploit and get their money. So I've been playing a lot of that, on my spare time when I have nothing else to do. And it's been pretty good. I know you guys have not played Payday 2. Is that correct?
I have not.
The funny thing is, I have it because it was, I believe, released for free at one point in time on Steam, and I've always wanted to play it, but I honestly never had anyone else to play it with, so I would love to play it with you at some point.
No, you actually should. That's how I got it. It was like 2016, maybe 17, somewhere around there. It was out for free, and I was like, well, I'm going to try out like free game, of course. And I knew it was a first-person shooter, so I was like, well, I'll try this out, having played, years and years and years of Counter-Strike. So I tried it out, and I'm like, you know what, this game's fun. It was nice to have a game where, like, especially a first-person shooter, where it's not based on defeating another person out in the world. You're actually working together to achieve or accomplish a mission, which is very nice to kind of have. So I've been playing a little bit of that again since I kind of taken a long break, trying to learn how to stealth again and everything. It comes back quick. And yeah, we definitely should try that out, Tom. I think you'd probably enjoy that over a competitive shooter because you're working together to defeat, the police officers that come and whatever other mission kind of things are out there.
You can't see it, but I'm raising my hand because that sounds like something I would be into as well.
Yeah, so like Left 4 Dead, you mentioned that. It's very similar to Left 4 Dead. It's a completely cooperative first-person shooter, not really competitive amongst yourselves, which is really nice. The only downside to it is that there's a lot of DLC stuff. So like if you don't have a certain mission, but you play it with a friend who does have the DLC or a random person, then it's like, oh, I want that, but I have to spend like $5 to get this DLC. I forget who creates the game, and I apologize for that. But the game creator made it not like Paradox, for example, with Europa Universalis, or something like a Paradox game like Hearts of Iron. Those, you spend $20 and you get just like a tiny little feature. Whereas this game, Payday 2, they give you like 8 new missions every time you buy a DLC. So it's nice to get a larger chunk of missions every time you buy something, and it's very reasonable, $5 or so, I think, for a DLC.
That's a comfortable range. I think microtransactions are kind of a hot button issue, and maybe we'll get into that some more as we talk more.
Another whole separate thing.
Oh, absolutely. But that does sound very reasonable to me.
So that's probably what I've been playing mostly, outside of kind of our group and the things you mentioned. I can't really think of anything else. I've been getting a lot of Nintendo Switch games, and I've been playing through Breath of the Wild, but I'm not going to spoil any of that, of course, just because I know you guys want to play it at some point. So
I have played and beaten Breath of the Wild.
Okay, well, you and I could talk about it, but I know that Pinto has not.
I can take my headphones out. I don't even have a Switch yet, and I really want one, and I think my tax return, some of that might be going towards getting a Switch.
Yeah. If you decide to get a Switch, you have to let us know, because there are so many wonderful games on there that we could recommend.
There are so many games I want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So just to jump in with what I've been playing lately, to be honest, my time outside of playing Rocket League with you fine fellas has been a little bit on the restricted side. I do have a mobile game I play a lot of, just kind of in my downtime, which is called Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. I'm not super proud of the amount of time that I put into that game, because it's a game that supports a lot of high dollar microtransactions. But I do get a lot of enjoyment out of it, just because it offers a lot of that kind of Final Fantasy turn-based nostalgia combat, and allows you to use units from across the entirety of the series, as well as some decent original story units. So that's my guilty pleasure. I'm probably always doing that at least a couple times a day. And in addition to that, I would say I do get on a Fortnite or an Overwatch every once in a while. And I have been playing Pokemon Sword from time to time. It's a game that I pick up and put down here and there, but every time I pick it up, I am thoroughly engrossed in it, despite the fact that I think that some of the Pokemon in this generation are maybe not quite as great as some of the others. I do absolutely love some of the ones that are very good, and I have been enjoying just the way that the game looks and feels and is very natural, and encouraging you to catch many, many Pokemon that are out there in the wild areas.
So what you said is really interesting, in that the things you mentioned are all games that are portable. So again, this could probably be a really lengthy topic, but as someone who is not, unfortunately, in their teenage years anymore, it is nice for us to be able to still play games, even if we're not at a computer. I remember being 10 to 12 years old, 10 to 15 years old, and everything was at a desktop PC. And if you weren't at a desktop PC or at a console itself, like a PlayStation, there was no in between. It was either you're sitting at a PlayStation or you're sitting at a desktop. There's no in between. So the Switch, for example, the fact that you can plug it in and plug it out is perfect for you, because if you're traveling, if you're just not able to kind of sit down and work that stuff, or if you only have a couple minutes to play, you could do one more dungeon of Zelda and get through just a little bit more. Or in the case of your phone, you can play just a little bit of that while you're waiting for the train, while you're getting onto a flight, while you're doing all different kinds of stuff like that. So it's nice to kind of be able to have games that are easily picked up and put back down very quickly, versus something like we mentioned Rocket League or Payday 2 or other games like that, where you really have to sit down and just play out a whole thing that might be 30 minutes long before you're finally able to step away. So it's nice to have that in between console, in between gaming.
Absolutely. And I think really you hit the nail on the head with one of the things that I honestly love the most about gaming right now, which is probably just the Nintendo Switch. I mean, just the way that it works, and the way that Nintendo really had the foresight to say, hey, mobile gaming is something that we have a huge foothold in. We know that a lot of people are doing things on their phones, but maybe we can take the console experience and make it something that you can take with you. And, you can get something more powerful than what you get on your phone out of this device that actually still feels pretty good in your hands, as opposed to trying to hit touchscreen controls on your phone. And maybe we'll go into that one of these days in a little bit more depth, because I think we will.
Well, we also have new consoles coming out pretty soon, a couple months from now, right? The new Xbox is kind of being worked on. They actually just had a lot of news come out about that. And the PlayStation 5 just had some kind of counter news, if you will, about what they're doing. So I think there's a whole topic and a long discussion you could have about consoles and where they're going and what Microsoft is doing with the Xbox versus what Sony's doing with the PlayStation versus the Switch, and how they're not building a new console, but they're still trying to explore new games. And it is, really revolutionized how people are gaming recently.
Yeah, and I fully admit I have not looked at any of the specs for the Xbox or PlayStation consoles.
It just came out. It really did.
I saw them, but even knowing that they were out there, it's almost my feeling that they're almost irrelevant. I mean, the biggest thing to me is kind of load times, and then we're just at such a point where graphics are right now that things look good enough to me on the Switch. And they can look amazing. Like, it can look like real life in video game graphics right now relatively effortlessly. I felt like we were pretty powerful in the PlayStation 4, Xbox One generation, that wherever we take it in the next generation, it's not graphics that's really going to define this console generation for me. It's going to be the selection of games that are available. And really, I think that's going to be great, because I think it's going to bring us back to a time when the thing that mattered most was fun.
Yes.
And I'm kind of excited about that.
My largest motivation in wanting to get a Switch beyond the whole mobile gaming aspect of it is that Nintendo games are just fun.
Oh yeah.
I have a PlayStation. Like, I've always kind of been a PlayStation guy.
Same here.
But the largest issue I have with PlayStation right now is, I can turn and look at it right now. Almost every single game I have, bar 2 or 3, are just so dark and heavy and emotional, and that's great when you want it, but sometimes you just want to sit down and have fun, and that's what the Nintendo is for.
And you know what? That is absolutely excellent, because that segues directly into the first topic I've prepared for today.
After 20 minutes.
That's perfect. I like this.
So what I wanted to gush about a little bit, or at least just talk about, is one of my favorite things in video games, and not so much in the PlayStation games of today, but in a lot of the games that used to exist on Super Nintendo, on PlayStation, and to some degree on PlayStation 2, was the vibrancy of games, the colors of games, the brightness, and just the beautiful color palette that many of them had. Have either of you played Secret of Mana or any of the Secret of Mana games?
Legend of Mana on the PlayStation 1 I adore. Even though it's a very confusing game, and I have no idea how to make the story work like it's supposed to, very beautiful game.
Story be gone, you can look at that game and like someone could pull an art asset out of that game. They could pull a character out of that game. They could pull a tree out of that game, right? And you could say, that's from Legend of Mana. That's from the Mana series, right?
Yeah.
It's iconic, and we've lost something in the way of iconic art in the most recent generations of things, because there's so much direction towards realism. And that's where I think Nintendo is really winning lately. Because when you look at a game like Super Mario Odyssey, or you look at a game like Breath of the Wild, there's an iconic style to those things. And that vibrancy still lives on in those things in the Nintendo kind of world.
Could you give a example of what you meant by realism? That there's other games that are not meeting that kind of standard? Like Breath of the Wild?
Sure. The first thing that comes to my mind is, I know I'm several years behind the times, but my wife and I recently picked up Horizon Zero Dawn and played through a good portion of that. And when you think about a game like that, that's kind of a flagship game for the PlayStation 4, because it was very early days when it was released, and because it has a very iconic setting where spoiler alert, as with all things, humanity is kind of in a tribal state among robotic machines, hunting machines, and trying to figure out a little bit of its past, but more concerned with surviving the present. You would think that dinosaur robots, right, really scream iconic design, something that you'll remember. You would think that tribal humans with mechanical accessories and clothing and weaponry and, you know, things like this, but still in kind of a tribal fashion, that would really stick out to you as a powerful, iconic graphic. And maybe to some people it does, but my experience with it was, no, it really felt like somebody was trying to, you know, play a Native American society that just had dinosaur robots in it. And the graphics in the game all looked so geared towards the realistic that there was almost a lack of that fantasy component, that signature component that said, hey, here's something, you know, that'll really stand out. And part of it is because it's still based on a destroyed modern world. So, you know, you kind of see teepees and huts and things like that, and you say, oh yeah, you know, I recognize that, and it's interesting that it's built to some degree out of metal scrap and stuff like that. But you'll also see destroyed office buildings. And when I look at those, I don't really say unique setting, vibrant setting, interesting and colorful and bright. I still see a lot of the kind of washed outness of that. And part of that comes from it being, you know, despite its unique setting, it's still a post-apocalyptic world. And there are a lot of video games out there right now which are set in post-apocalyptic worlds.
Oh, that's become the genre of choice in the past 5 years.
Absolutely. And not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that. There's just a part of me that really enjoys those games that try to establish a lighter mood, a more colorful mood. And the other comparison that really comes into my mind, and I'll be honest, has me a little bit worried, is comparing the original Final Fantasy VII to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because when I look at the original Final Fantasy VII, I think a lot of people tend to remember Midgar, and they remember Midgar as being dark, gritty, slummy, all this stuff. And they don't think about places like Eris's sector, where there's beautiful, bright flower garden, and you can see the sun coming in, and the beautiful green grass, or when you get out into the world before things get a little bit haywire, and you see all kinds of rivers and lakes and streams and forests, and you go into Cosmo Canyon and there's a beautiful palette of desert reds and oranges, and you know, you get under the stars with not only Bugenhagen but with Tifa in earlier cutscenes, and Tifa's dress is a teal color. You don't see that in the modern post-apocalyptic world. And I'm a little bit cautious about the remake because it looks like it wants to tend towards that gritty, darker, more modern palette that I feel is kind of inspired by like the Dark Knight trilogy. I feel like that was kind of the origin of the decrease in vibrancy and increase in desaturated color tones.
Yeah, and also intensity, I would say. So like
Yeah.
the whole Dark Knight series you mentioned, if we're going to movies a little bit, it's an intense kind of nature throughout the whole thing. The music all the time is that really deep music that kind of just like chills your bones a little bit. And you're right, I would hope they don't do that, because there's a lot of moments in Final Fantasy VII that are, you know, very light, that are supposed to make you kind of laugh or at least chuckle a little bit. You have your whole Golden Saucer kind of playland, which is supposed to be an uplifting kind of area. I remember you would go on a date with the character, right? And you'd be going up the, what do they call it, gondolas? There's kind of like a gondola, and you see like fireworks,
yeah,
right?
That Ferris wheel
I hope that
thing,
they don't
right?
try to take away a lot of that stuff there. But I mean, yeah, it's a good point. And I think that it's something that, unfortunately, game developers, I guess, have to take that back. And something like Nintendo, like Pinto mentioned, you know, Nintendo's trying a whole different thing. Everything is much more cheerful throughout. Even something like Breath of the Wild is so vast, but the color palette is so much more pleasant, so much more enjoyable. Yeah, there's moments of, at least as far as I've gone, of fear or concern, but it still keeps it not at that deep, dark level. At least to the point that I've gotten in the game so far. I don't know what happens later on.
Isn't it interesting too that when you think about it, Breath of the Wild is really it's a post-apocalyptic world too?
Absolutely. It's a post-apocalyptic world, and you don't even know that that's really had happened, at least at the start. But yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic world, but it's so nice. There's things flying about, there's birds that are going different places, there's horses all over. Like, it's still really kind of cool, and I like that kind of approach to a post-apocalyptic world. Another game that does that well from an intense but colorful thing is The Last of Us, right? I could sit there and just look at the various things, especially like when you see like the giraffes in that game, other things like that. It has its dark moments, it has its very intense moments, but there's a lot of beauty that is there just because the world has fallen into that apocalypse. But you see giraffes walking around in a university. Like, you get to see cutscenes of them. That kind of stuff's really, really cool. And I know, Pinto, you love The Last of Us, so I'm sure you could go on and on about that or other games.
That's
like that.
actually the game that I was going to bring up earlier, because, like you said, there are so many moments of just that sort of clarity and beauty that happen. But the reason it's done so well in that game is because of the contrast, where you are in those dark, abandoned buildings being assaulted by the clickers and the infected. And then finally you make it out, and all of a sudden, once you're back in the outside world, it's bright, lush green trees, and they did a great job graphically of, like, you can see the sunbeams coming through nature.
Mm-hmm.
And the contrast is really what brings that to a higher level, where you're like, this is just a safe, beautiful area that I'm in now.
Yeah, the whole world won't be a storm and be dark and gloomy all the time if an apocalypse happened. Life would take over, nature would take over, and there'd still be beauty there. And it's very unfortunate. Some game developers who create post-apocalyptic worlds take away all of that.
And you both took the words right out of my mouth, because contrast, I think, is really key in that game. And I think that idea of showing nature reclaiming things, so that the contrast between decay and then the rebirth in the nature is really what makes that game visually appealing and really, really interesting, as opposed to other post-apocalyptic worlds. But I would also say another thing in favor of The Last of Us in terms of iconic imagery that I was sort of having an issue with earlier. The clickers are so different from other zombies, and the mushroom fungus-based infection is so different from other approaches to that again is something that if you were to see it, you could point at it and say, yes, that's from The Last of Us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all in all, I think there are definitely very good examples today of games that still get it right. And it's not just limited to the Nintendo Switch. We do have games like The Last of Us, which are on broad platforms, but originally on the PlayStation. And I'm very much hoping that we start to see more of that, because I would really love to see even brighter games like those in the Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana style, with just those really vibrant palettes. And I think Stardew Valley, as we touched on earlier, is kind of one of those as well. But I would be interested to see what that looks like too, in less of an 8-bit kind of setting.
Yeah.
So more of a 3D setting. So I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure it'll come to us.
I just want to touch on one more thing on that, and then we'll move on to the next topic. I recently read an article. I can't remember. It was on some gaming website, of course, your Polygons or Kotakus or whatever, talking about Resident Evil 5. And I don't know if you guys played Resident Evil 5 or not.
I have not.
They discovered that the entire game has like this weird urine yellow filter over the entire game, and someone went in and just took that filter out, and all of a sudden the game looks so much better. And it's crazy, because it's a survival horror game, so you want it to be, intense and darker. But I think having the contrast of removing that filter and having the world seem more vibrant would make the game more jarring and more impactful.
I agree, and I also feel like sometimes when you see something like that, where it's something simple like a color filter being placed over, if not the entire game, then the majority of it, It's someone being lazy and trying to cheat the system.
Yeah.
And the system is too smart for that. It's smarter than you think.
Well, it makes you wonder what game developer was like, yeah, let's throw this color filter over it to make it darker. But like, it seems like they didn't do their homework. They didn't like play through the game again. They looked at that one area where they were struggling, or that one feeling that somebody said, in a game dev meeting, and was like, yeah, that looks good, let's keep it. And didn't like, no one countered that. No one said that's not the approach we're going for. So really, it's disappointing when those kind of things happen. And it's interesting, how gamers just as a whole find those things that were wrong and point them out and call them out. Happens in movies too. They just say, no, this does not look right. This does not feel right. And it's unfortunate when no one in the game development space catch that and then fix it before the release, of course.
That's very, very true. And probably the most pertinent example in the movie world is Sonic the Hedgehog, which
Recently, yeah,
is doing very well since gamers called out the look and feel of Sonic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it did very well in the theaters. And I personally didn't see it, but having seen the difference between what it was going to look like and what it ultimately became from a trailer perspective, it definitely looked a lot better. Just from that, it made me want to go see it more. Fortunately, I never got to it.
We can be honest, as children of the 90s, we saw that first trailer and went, that's not Sonic.
No!
Yeah, that's not Sonic. That's completely wrong.
What have you done to my boy?
But they fixed him, so all credit.
Just imagine if, we've talked about the Switch a little bit. Just imagine if they tried to really change up Mario. I mean, there's old Mario movies. I don't think there's anything recent.
That movie. Woo.
And those were more ridiculous comedies, but like, imagine if they tried to do that today. Like, that would just not work at all. And they really, I imagine if Nintendo were to put out Mario movies, they would make sure he stays true to character. I would actually imagine they keep it animated as well. They don't go any route of having actual people in it.
I don't know how you would even begin to make a Mario movie. I'm, outside of the legendary Super Mario Brothers movie, which belongs in everyone's trash can. I just don't know how you even would. I would be fascinated.
Well, just wait for Disney to buy Nintendo, and then we're gonna see it.
Oh no,
it's not.
No, he said it. It's gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen. Nintendo, fortunately, wants to be their own company, from what I've heard, and do their own thing, which is a wonderful thing. And it's also Japanese owned, so it's a little bit more of a they don't want to be owned by an American company, I think. But
that's true.
Anyway, it's a really good topic, Tom. I really appreciate you bringing that kind of thing up, and I think it's something that, as a whole, needs to be discussed more by gamers and needs to be brought to game developers in advance. But I don't know if we're going to see a change until the game sales just don't meet up with what, like, everyone's buying those intense games. If they just didn't buy those games, then maybe we would see a change in the market.
Absolutely. Call of Duty will always
stop buying Call of Duty. So my topic actually will coalesce with some of the things we've already talked about, those being Mario and Vibrancy. And to go from Tom's very general topic to kind of being very ultra-specific, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite characters in a Mario franchise who was a one-and-done. And Tom, you might be able to guess who I'm talking about. If any of you out there have played Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, why has Geno never been in anything else? And I have a small answer to that. Is because obviously he is intellectual property of Square Enix, and they, after a time, did not work with Nintendo anymore. But they're kind of getting back in there. Come on, man, bring Geno back.
I think it's been too long to bring Geno back, unfortunately. But I would agree that Geno is a really cool character. But I think it's going to be very hard to ever see that back. I mean, Super Mario RPG was a great game, though. Just bringing that out there.
I want to disagree that it's been too long to bring Geno back.
How would you say? I mean, who remembers him aside from people that played Super Mario RPG years ago?
That's absolutely it. That's the only people who remember him. But when has that stopped a good reboot from happening again? I could easily see Nintendo making the very, very wise decision to partner with Square in the near future, possibly on the Nintendo Switch platform, to create as close to a direct sequel to Super Mario RPG as we would ever see, which would include the two characters we've never seen again, Geno and Mallow.
So I will agree with you in that point, that if they brought out a Super Mario RPG, I could definitely see Geno and Mallow coming back. I would agree with that. But I thought, Pinto, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you were trying to say a standalone Geno video game.
I see what
that would never happen.
That would never happen. But here's the thing, and here's kind of what I wanted to get into with this, is that Geno is arguably the most important character in Super Mario RPG, even though he's not the main character.
Okay.
Would you guys agree with that?
He is absolutely the most important character in Super Mario RPG.
Because obviously, the game's called Super Mario RPG. It's a Mario game. It was very different from anything Nintendo had done with Mario up to this point. And even afterwards, there have been Mario RPGs, the Paper Mario series, pretty good. I love the Thousand Year Door. But they don't capture the same feeling of Legend of the Seven Stars. Because while it was quirky and had the whole silly Mario thing going on, it was a fairly heavy-handed game.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a game like The Thousand Year Door, which again, I love, they lean very much into like, that game is snarky, man. You get berated in that game and people treat you like you're stupid, which kind of has its own charm, but at the same time it's like, well, man, I'm playing games to have a good time. Like, don't yell at me.
I was going to bring up the point that I feel like those Paper Mario type games have maintained the same sense of kind of levity and almost sarcasm as like Super Mario RPG. But I'm revisiting my earlier statement, and I don't really know if we'll ever see the same sort of convergence that really led to Super Mario RPG. Because if you think about it, and this feeds nicely into my topic about vibrance, because Super Mario RPG is amazingly vibrant.
Yeah, a very bright and beautiful game.
Really, at that time, 3D graphics were pretty new. Yeah. And Super Mario RPG tried to deal with creating a 3D world out of a 2D one, without really going the Paper Mario route of acknowledging the fact that they were trying to do that. And it took itself seriously, but at the same time, it took itself seriously in a comic booky fashion. We had the Axum Rangers, who were basically Power Rangers. We still had Bowser trying to steal Princess Peach, but in the end, he and Mario made a tentative alliance, which is, I think, was actually a first for Mario in that series, and was fun. Like, there was a whole plot line about Bowser, like, reluctantly accepting Mario as one of his Koopa Troopas.
Yeah.
And all the while, Mario stayed entirely silent. But like you said, Geno being one of the most important characters, Geno guided the story away from just the straight Mario plotline into the world of the Seven Stars, which is where the game really got its uniqueness. So the convergence was really both from moving from a 2D world to a 3D world, and from moving from a 2D platformer in the Mario sense to the RPG story-oriented game, really, because Mario had not had much of a story up to that point other than what you would see in Go Save the Princess.
Yeah, go right, save the princess.
But Geno, definitely one of the best characters of all time, as hopefully some future listeners will know, being the Star Child and being basically one of the guardians of the stars and taking Mario where he needed to be to save the world. Just great.
I just want to talk about Geno, say that I miss him.
I mean, I haven't played through Super Mario RPG in quite some time, but still, that game, and maybe it's the whole childhood, since that's when I played it. It might be that just kind of there's nostalgia there, and I do miss it. I would love to play. I actually should play Super Mario RPG again. It's a great game.
I do wonder about that, though. I understand the whole nostalgia thing, but there have been games where I've gone back that I loved as a kid and been like, wow, this is garbage. This is not one of those games. This is still one of my all-time favorite games. I go back and play it probably like once every other year or something.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask if you'd gone back because I have, and it absolutely holds up. Every moment of that game is so lovingly crafted with imagination and fun, and really you feel, like I've said, that convergence of those two elements the whole way through. I was just thinking about it, and even the way that you have your combat, it tries to mix RPG and platformer elements because
Yep.
RPGs didn't have that timing element of landing your jump or getting a bonus for pressing A at the exact moment that you hit somebody and seeing something new. That was all new to that game, and it made it
man.
so much fun.
Timed hits.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the last thing I want to mention about it, and this is more general Super Mario RPG than Geno specific, but I think the big problem that I have when people say Paper Mario is supposed to be the sequel to Mario RPG is that the spirit is different because they break the fourth wall so much in the Paper Mario games, and they're like, hey gamers, wow, we got you, right guys? It's like, don't you want to immerse yourself in a game, man? Like being like, oh, a lot of times when games are like, oh, press the A button. I hate that. I hate that in games. It's like, oh, just push up. It's like, nah, man, tell me it in universe. Mario RPG was wonderful at that. And the Paper Mario games are like, hey, hold the R button, rotate the control stick, okay? Do it. The game's not going to move on until you do it. It's like, oh, God.
There are some games that do that in such a fun way. Even just breaking the fourth wall. Like, if you remember playing Metal Gear Solid, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure both of you have played Metal Gear Solid. There are amazing moments in that force you to break the fourth wall in an extremely serious game. Having Psycho Mantis, read your mind off of your memory card, or having him move your controller by using the rumble feature. Stuff like that, that again relied on the convergence of new technologies, but was fun and made you think about things differently and used breaking the fourth wall in that sense. But when someone just says, oh, press R, I get it. You're trying to be,
economical.
You're a gamer, you're used to this. But make it fun. It's a game. Make it all fun. Nothing's worse than a boring tutorial level.
All right, what have you got for us, Mr. Fleming?
Wow. So you guys went much more broad. So I'd like to talk
I don't think I was specific, but we made it broad. But
yeah, and maybe that's true, and that's what I'm going to do as well. So the game I did not mention that at the beginning that I've been playing a lot of is Age of Empires 2 specifically, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because there's actually a tournament that's coming out right now. What I actually didn't know, and if you don't know, Age of Empires is now 20 years old. So I remember it when I was like 10, 11 years old, somewhere around there, and what I like about that game is that they've had apparently this long-term following, and it's much easier in a strategy game. It's much easier in a game that doesn't really have a story. So like Super Mario RPG, you see swing up and swing down of people being interested in it. But games like that, like StarCraft, Brood War, that have these long-term communities around them. So in the case of Age of Empires, there's actually a tournament coming up that Microsoft has sponsored called the Hidden Cup 3. It actually just started yesterday. And it's incredible how this community kind of rally together to ask for a new version of the game. So they just got Definitive Edition in December of last year. How they got Microsoft to be willing to sponsor a massive part of the prize pool. I think about 35,000 of the 50,000, if not a little more of that. So it's just really cool to me seeing these communities. So I was wondering if you guys know other games, or if you have questions about that game in particular, that of that have these long-term communities that stick around, that are always going to continue on because they just have this love for this game, and maybe to some degree this nostalgia for this game that came out potentially 10, 20 years ago.
I think you named most of them. Like, obviously StarCraft. I mean, that's how we met. That's how, well, you and I at least, Fleming, we met and bonded over StarCraft in college. I guess maybe older fighting games, but the problem with fighting games is that they constantly release new editions. So you can say that, yeah, there's a fighting game community, but it's always moving on to the hottest topic or the newest game.
But I think there are still people that completely stay on Street Fighter 2 some sort of edition because there are so many editions of that.
Or Super Smash Brother Melee.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think it's really neat seeing people retain a love for a game that maybe graphically is not as demanding, or maybe, in the case of either one of the two strategy games that we talked about, that it's not an easy game. I mean, if anyone's ever played StarCraft Brood War, it's a pain in the ass even to move a 2 control group army effectively. So it's really amazing to me seeing people who maybe played the game when they were young, seeing this game come back and just being like, oh my God, this game's great. I missed this game. So I love those kind of things. And I think that for anyone that does listen to this podcast, we should find out about those games. We should talk about those games, because from my perspective, and again, this is probably mostly because of the type of games that I often play, the best games are games that have communities. In the case of a Final Fantasy or Super Mario RPG, there's a story, and at the end of the story, it's over. There might be a little bit of a community following for a little while, waiting for the remake, waiting for the new game, but games that don't have a story, that have that long term, I just find fascinating, because I find the idea of people coming together to play the games, wanting to kind of expand the game's overall viewership, to be really the best part about gaming. And I think that those story games, while great, kind of take you away from being able to play with other people. So I just love games that bring people together.
And I'll be honest, I can go off on this from so many directions, but I've definitely felt video game communities pull people together throughout my life. Pinto already touched on the fact that the three of us really met through gaming early on in our college experience. Really, it was Rock Band, Rock Band Guitar Hero.
That was my other topic. If we had more time, I was planning to talk about, and in community games like Rock Band, but go on. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And we can do a whole segment about Rock Band at one point too, I'm sure. But Rock Band, Super Smash Brothers, because I was the savvy nerd who picked up Super Smash Brothers and invited some folks that I knew a little bit to come over and play. And hey, now we're like best friends. And then also StarCraft, as Pinto mentioned, was something really, as we got into our sophomore year, all three of us really started playing StarCraft Brood War. The other thing about StarCraft Brood War that was very kind to me, I would say, was at a point in my life when I was abroad and I went to Korea to try and be an English teacher there, and spoke no Korean and was having a miserable bout of depression. I was able to turn on television channels where StarCraft is broadcast 24/7, and I could find something familiar that I understood and I could watch, that no language barrier could get in the way of. And that was really comforting in a time that I really needed it. So, just things like that can kind of pull us together and help us bond, or help us, see that sense of comfort. It's just really great. I can also go off on one other thing, which is MMO communities, but I'm going to save that for another time because I am a vastly experienced MMO gamer and have a lot to say about it.
And I'm sure, all three of us could go on, but in a lot of ways, gaming and the communities is really how, people who I personally could not go out in the middle of a dance floor, in the middle of a cafe, and talk to someone. But if I saw that person playing StarCraft, you bet your butt I would go sit down next to them and say, oh, you play StarCraft? What race do you play? Games kind of are such a good icebreaker just in general. I mean, you see it in even non-video games. You see games being icebreakers in corporations all across the world. It's just, I think that the idea of games and gaming is just such a good way to kind of open up the floor, get to talk to people and get to meet new people where you might be too shy to just go up to them without kind of that connection, or without that kind of joint experience coming out of it. So that's why I wanted to talk about that. Yes, I did plan maybe talk a little bit more about Age of Empires 2 in particular, but just the whole sense of community I think is really important for games.
Absolutely agreed. And if you would like to talk more about Age of Empires 2, I think you're
I could tell
more
you
than welcome
everything.
to, or if you would like to at another time.
I would probably have to go into more details. I'll wait until the end of the tournament, and then I can like kind of highlight the commentator who kind of put the game together, talk about some of the better games maybe in that, maybe send you guys the links so you guys can watch at least the finals and kind of get into a game that you did not know or don't know how to play very well or very much, and you guys could kind of see and give your thoughts on it, and just kind of talk about what you saw from a very outsider's perspective.
You can hear our astonishment as we watch them gather food at an unprecedented rate compared to how we do. Yeah.
You can make a boar come back to your town center? What?
Hey, I did that.
Yes, you did do that. That is a pro gamer move.
I do just also want to point out, going back to the beginning of the topic, specifically with the Age of Empires, it to me is bonkers that gamers did somehow convince a gigantic corporation like Microsoft to sponsor a prize pool for a 20-plus-year-old game.
Sponsor a prize pool and get a remastered edition of it. Now, again, that could be a whole other topic, the idea of remakes and remasters that have been coming out over the past 5 years. But I don't think if there wasn't that strong of a push from the community that you would ever have seen that game get remade. Why? There's multiple Age of Empires after that game. There's multiple like Age of Mythology and other Microsoft games that they could have used to advertise the Xbox, advertise Windows 10 and other things, but they went back to that game because of the following and the community that's there. And then they not only did that, but then they also invested a huge prize pool. I mean, large tournaments cannot even put up that kind of prize pool, but they were able to do so for those, I believe it's 24 players, that were considered the best in the community. It's just incredible to me that gamers are able to kind of bring out these corporations and get these big sponsorships.
It's another topic we could even extrapolate from that is just how intertwined the gaming industry has become in the culture and therefore corporations, to the point where companies like Microsoft will sponsor a 20-year-old game and see that as a positive investment.
Yeah.
Because really, they wouldn't do it if they didn't think they were getting something out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Ew. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about.
I mean, it sounds like we came out of this with more topics than we came into it, which I think is pretty incredible.
That's very, very, very true. I think, however, now is the time to wrap it up. We've been going for like an hour, guys. Which
I just looked at the timer too.
Which, before we started this, Tom was like, we'll probably go for like 25, 30 minutes. And that's long, man. I feel like that's going to be long. I feel like we'll probably streamline this more the more we do it. But we were just excited and had a lot to talk about this time. Because it's the first episode.
It's the first episode.
Not the final
hopefully
countdown.
many more.
Trademark.
I also want to point out that copyright strikes. I want to point out that we'll probably have rotating people coming in. I have plenty of people that I've spoken to this about that might want to pop in and out here and there. I plan on always being here. I think you guys will probably always be here, but we'll bring in other people here and there and get some fresh hot takes.
I'll take a sick day when the virus strikes.
Okay. All right. I was gonna say something about like, here's where you can find us, but if you're listening to this podcast, you found it. So, social media plugs to come eventually. Not this time. It's the first episode. Shut up, past Mike Pinto, because here's future Mike Pinto to plug those social media channels that you were talking about. I also got a new mic in between the time that this first episode was recorded and when I'm recording these plugs, so sorry for the disparity in sound quality. Anyways, social media channels are super easy. Just search for JoyPad Pod everywhere. So if you want us on Facebook, you can find JoyPad Pod. If you want us on Instagram, just search for JoyPad Pod. And if you want us on Twitter, I believe we're JoyPad Pod 1, but our handle is @JoyPadPod. Anyways, back to the past.
Follow us on and click that link at
and punch that bell.
Smack that subscribe button, boys.
Spank that.
Thanks, Ed. All right. Thanks for
Spank, that's
listening,
what I
everyone.
yell about the balls on Rocket League.
Cool, thanks.
A lovely header. We'll see you guys next time. Or,
Bye.
yeah, something. Bye.